This is Gary Ornstein with Bitwarden, and I'm going to be joined by a couple of my panelists here in a moment. We've got Dave Kennedy from TrustedSec. Hi, Dave. And we also have Jos Poortvliet, the co-founder and director of marketing at Nextcloud. The panel today is on strengthening security resilience through community collaboration. I'm going to jump in right away with a couple of questions. Dave, we'll start with you if that's okay. How has integrating open source solutions into your technology strategy benefited your organization?
Yeah, when you look at security in general, I think most people think of, APIs and cryptography and things like that have been gone through, but there's also a whole other area around cybersecurity that are offensive capabilities and tools that are designed to help emulate what other attackers do. And so, by understanding what attackers do and being able to kind of model your attacks and your defensive capabilities around that, allow you to have a much stronger product in general. And the community collaboration that you have around those is really good. I've authored a number of open source tools. We have our own product that we leverage open source very heavily with and have community projects for. What you get from the analysis component of the open source community, the collaboration, as well as features and functionality is unparalleled, I think, to anything else that you have out there, including your ability to identify threats and vulnerabilities and exposures, via more published code versus closed source. So I think for me, it's that collaboration aspect that you have and being able to pull from many folks, especially if you have things like bug bounty programs, things like that can really help dive down into maybe potential exposures that you have in your own product, can really make and bolster your products as well as what you're doing in your own company and organization even better, especially by having those capabilities of tooling.
Got it. And could you give us just a 1-minute explanation of your business, Dave, so the audience is aware?
Yeah, absolutely. So I own two companies. Founded TrustedSec and Binary Defense. We have over 350 folks worldwide. We focus, we're in 3 of the Fortune 5, 70% of the Fortune 1000 companies, and everything from small to medium-sized businesses. We focus primarily on everything from information security consulting, so penetration testing, red teaming, source code analysis, governance, advisory services, all the way to managed detection and response, where we're looking for intrusions and attackers, in some of the biggest and largest enterprises, across the world, trying to stop attackers and figure out what they're doing and making sure that you have good defenses against it. Great.
Jos, I'd like to move on to you. One with just a quick intro of Nextcloud. There's always been a lot of community overlap, especially on social media when people talk about the different tools that they use. So I'm sure the entire Bitwarden community is happy to hear from you. So that intro, and then also a little bit about how integrating open source has really benefited the Nextcloud movement.
Yeah, I mean, those two are almost the same thing, right? I mean, we founded Nextcloud to give people back control over their data, and where Bitwarden does this, of course, around passwords, among other things. For us, this was really a lot about like the data that you collaborate on, so documents, but this quickly extended to chat and video calls, to email, calendar, etc. So unlike Dave, like we're a product company, so we make a online open source collaboration platform with this document sharing, with this video chat, calendar, mail, and all these other basic functionalities that you need to work together. And it's all open source. It's designed to run on premises, so we make software. We don't host. I always have to tell people, no, we have cloud in the name, but we're kind of the anti-cloud in a way. Of course, people do run Nextcloud in the cloud, even at Amazon EC2, and that's your choice. You can run it wherever you like, but it's the control and the choice there again. That's the key difference. And so doing this as open source, getting kind of to the question, this is, the transparency, I think, is the key, and Dave also mentioned this. As a company, by working in the public, I think this creates a culture, both internally in our company, and that's how we wanted it when we started the company. It creates an awareness that people pay attention, that people are looking. So you get some kind of hygiene. Like developing the product in the open means that people, will not think like, oh, well, this is maybe not super safe, but hey, who knows it? It's in the corner somewhere. We'll fix it later. This kind of stuff, right? You can't do that because there are people watching. And, it's kind of a negative example, but there's been a lot of studies that like when people feel they're being surveilled, they change their behavior. and we're kind of maybe harnessing that in a positive way when you're running an open source business, an open source company, that just because it's public, people can and do look at it. And this is that's pretty core to our DNA as a company. And I know that's not terribly different for Bitwarden, right? Just the fact that people can look already makes a difference. But of course, in practice, people also do look, and that's, well, I'm guessing we'll get into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like both of you to share some examples of this because, and it's actually part of the reason why this conference began, that there are often misconceptions about open source and the ability for open source to provide security resilience. So could you each talk perhaps about examples where you have folks who have that moment of like, wait a second, how can that be secure? And walking them through what actually makes the approach more secure.
Well, first of all, I'll just say transparently, I am a Nextcloud customer and Bitwarden user as well. So, we're in good company here with everything. And why is that, by the way? Well, we're a cybersecurity company, and we need to ensure that the products and technology that we're using is best in class when it comes to what we have exposure to. We work with government agencies. We work with some of the biggest companies in the world. To me, the benefit that you have in the market space around having an open source collaboration, one, we know, hey, you're using solid cryptography. We've obviously seen password managers and password vaults, especially closed source ones, have some major problems here in the past, few years when it comes to their ability to protect the containers and storage and how they're doing cloud centric security on those. So, for us, it's nice and transparent when we're going into a customer. And let's just say they have a closed source product. Well, we're going from a black box perspective. We usually find some pretty horrendous things, whereas when we're going from an open source perspective, we may find things, but it's not nearly as catastrophic. I mean, I can say from 25 years of doing security experience, I mean, I've done everything from zero-day research to Microsoft products. I'm considered, the father of PowerShell security. I started the whole PowerShell security movement in Microsoft. Jeff Snover, the father of PowerShell security, called me that, which is pretty cool. My whole career has been dedicated on offensive security. And, I can say time and time again, the products that take more time for us to get access to or to find exposures is open source because it's gone through that rigor more. I think when people think open source, they're like, oh, well, it must not be commercial, right? Is I think the first thing you think of. Whereas I would argue it's more commercial and more streamlined and more used because you're getting that collaboration. And what's really cool, if you look at a lot of the open source projects out there, you get a ton of fans that are just passionate about your brand, about what you're building. And then they start, really amplifying your product and coming out with some amazing ideas and features, and that enhances your product overall. So for me, being a security professional, again, 25 years in the industry, I prefer open source because I know what I'm getting myself into, and I can validate that, with my customers, my attestations, as well as know that I have a much, stronger footprint from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with Dave here. And it's indeed the transparency. As I said earlier, it changes, I think, the internal company culture. People just care more about security because they know everything, is exposed to the light all the time. And of course, the other part is that indeed companies like Dave's, they do these reviews. And we often encounter customers that come to us and, inquire for Nextcloud and get Nextcloud Enterprise and, get up and running. And then sometimes even much later, you discover that they actually had hired an external company which had done a security audit, looked at the code, gave feedback. Is it a good product or not? So there are way more eyes looking at the code. I mean, you have to be realistic here. Some people think like, oh, just because I throw it on GitHub, a lot of people look at it. That there is, of course, there aren't a lot of people who just for hobby are reading code all day long, right, from random GitHub repos. But when you're, a widely used product, and Nextcloud is kind of the biggest in that space, right? If you run collaboration and you're okay handing over your data to Microsoft or Google, then you pick Microsoft or Google. And if you're not, you probably pick Nextcloud. So there are hundreds of thousands of servers out there, and for a ton of people with the incentive and the knowledge to look into it and to keep an eye on it and push back on us when something goes wrong or when they think something is wrong. So while on top of that, we have a $10,000 bug bounty program, which of course also helps. But yeah, I think it's the openness, and people find issues. They do report it. They do look at it. Again, it's not magic. It's both the culture, and you need to still have a good process, right? And this is another part, I think, that again, it's because it's open, and you get almost constant stream of like people, finding things, and you work in the open, you build automatically, because you have to, processes of dealing with it. And yeah, this is also, I think, for the entire industry, like the open source way of handling security issues, like the Linux kernel does, and tons of other sensitive projects do. They are often becoming the industry standard, simply because these projects, by working so transparently, are kind of forced to do things and optimize it and improve it all the time. And you see proprietary organizations and even standards organizations often lag behind the state of the art in open source. And a silly example is like, until not that long ago, a lot of like security standards were like, oh, you need to change your password every, I don't know, 2 months, which, we already all know for a long time is actually very dumb, because people will then take the same password and add a one at the end, and you should not have a password that is like a random set of characters, because they're hard to remember for humans, but easy to hack for computers, right? You need to have a password that is like a passphrase that is easy to remember, but a computer can't hack. Like these things, they often are not figured out by proprietary companies. Let's be honest. This happens in this global discussion between security researchers and, home users who care about security and are interested in it, and different companies working together in an open way.
Yeah.
To hit really quick on what Jos was saying there, notice he said we're forced to have to fix the issues, right? Because it's public and exposed. Whereas closed source, there's a number of times where we found some catastrophic issues that never get addressed, because nobody sees it. So when you're in the public, you're in the limelight, you're held to a completely different standard in open source than you are, via closed source, type of projects. And so the urgency to fix and address things becomes is substantially heightened. We actually found an exposure in Nextcloud, very minor. It was fixed in like 8 hours in published out. It was like, it was quick, a minor thing. And that's the type of thing that you find in products that specialize in open source, the agile workflow development, but also being able to take in other input sources and being able to do it. Whereas closed source, it's like this chaotic, slow moving machine in most cases for most of these organizations. And, really see code quality much better, even when reversing, for reversing, certain types of products and things like that. Code quality typically ends up being better because people actually get to see your code. So you actually do comments and, functions properly and everything else. So.
Yeah.
It has to do with cost, right? For a big organization, security is just a cost. And, as long as nobody hacks the system, or there is no big public, security explosion that gets into the news, then low priority. While, and the people on the floor, they are guided by these priorities from management. While in open source, you often see that the developers themselves, who are public, right, their name is out there. So they also have a motivation. While, if you're kind of anonymous in a big organization, might not even impact your career much if there's a big security flaw, but it doesn't blow back on you specifically. This is bad.
Jos and Dave, we've got a couple of minutes left. We've talked a lot about the protection and the security mechanisms and the vulnerability attention, but I want to flip the question around a little bit to innovation and collaboration, and perhaps each of you could give a quick summary of what you've seen and how open source has helped in these areas.
Just go ahead. You can go first. I'll go second.
All right. As I mentioned earlier, right, I think open source is often setting the standard in this regard. People are, by working transparently and open together, a lot of researchers are working. I mean, if you want to find a way to hack a system, as a security researcher, I mean, you're going to start with something that you can examine at all levels, right? That's like, I don't know, in biology, you will take like a tiny fly rather than a big complicated animal, because you already know a lot about the fly. This is the same thing with open source. Like, people will do their research on Linux or even one of the BSDs because they're open, they're well understood, they're well researched. Very few people will do cutting edge security research on Windows because, I mean, nobody else does it. It's a chicken egg, but also there's just not too much transparency there. You can't look into it. So I think open source is absolutely crucial for creating new standards and advancing, technology there. I mean, yeah, there's constantly stuff coming out, of course, about security issues. If you see like UEFIs and the proprietary BIOS firmwares, just because they're proprietary means there are tons of bugs hidden in there, and that almost nobody's aware of, and that keeps coming out, right? There was a whole bunch of issues with images that came out, just a few days ago, I think yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
Like this kind of stuff keeps surfacing because, again, the lack of transparency,
Yeah.
closed code is just a risk.
Thank you. Dave, we've got a few seconds left.
Yeah. Really quick summary on this is that, listen, inside your company, you have amazing folks that are passionate about the product and everything that you're building, right? And that's the community that Jos is talking about. But what happens with open source collaboration is that you also have an external community that is just as passionate and also gets to use the product and see things that you don't. Some of our best customer features that we've ever implemented, or things that I've written in open source tools or framework, have come from people using the tool saying, hey, it'd be cool if it did this, or hey, it'd be awesome if you could do this, or hey, by the way, there's another product that you can integrate to that gives you all of this capabilities. So, it's really driving your innovation forward because you're getting continual feedback. There's a great book, man, I escaped my name real quick, but it's basically a bunch of executives get in a room and they start talking about what's wrong with their business and why they're seeing their numbers going down, but they don't actually talk to the customer to see why their numbers are going down. They just have these ideas of why it's not working right. And when you can get that feedback from the community, from the people that are passionate about your product, that like your product, that wear your shirts, those are the types of folks that you want giving you collaboration and submitting PRs to get your product even better. So the innovation aspect and the ramp up period that you get via open source collaboration communities, astronomical. I have so many stories I could tell you about closed source horror stories of big companies where we had to go present at DEF CON and blow their front door out of the water for them to actually get to move things, right? It's a very big difference, and that public piece is a big component of that.
Fantastic. Well, Dave and Jos, thank you so much for bringing all of your insight to share with the Bitwarden community here today.